Hey there, it's Kat Kinsman, Executive Features Editor at Food & Wine, and this fall, we're launching the new Food & Wine Classic in Charleston with our partners at Southern Living and Travel + Leisure, and we want to see you there. Join us September 27th through the 29th to learn from iconic chefs, share a glass with innovative wine experts, and experience Charleston with one-of-a-kind events. Tickets are on sale now at foodandwine.com/Charleston Classic. That's foodandwine.com/Charleston Classic. See you down in Charleston.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Want to taste a flight of rare agave spirits at Rick Bayless's award-winning Bar Sotano? Or on La Barca Cantina, the storied taco boat touring New York's Hudson River? Or do you want to drink a special lager from the Maine Beer Company? Or how about coffee? Want to start your morning with a Mexican roast from the genius crew at Dark Matter? Well, you can do all those things and support Sacred in the process. Sacred is a not-for-profit that helps improve quality of life in the rural Mexican communities that make heritage agave spirits. We ask mezcalerxs what problems they have, what solutions they imagine to resolve those problems, and what resources they need to enact those solutions. Then, we go out and try to find those resources for them. All of those businesses I just mentioned, Bar Sotano, La Barca Cantina, Maine Beer Company, and Dark Matter Coffee, all of them have special offerings on right now that support Sacred. To learn more about these supportive, creative ventures, visit sacredagave.org/fun. That's sacredagave.org/fun, because real fun is also doing real good.
Agave Road Trip. Agave Road Trip.
I'm Lou Bank.
And I'm Rimas Sydris.
And this is Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps gringx bartenders better understand agave spirits, and rural Mexico. And today, in fact, Rimas, Rimas or Rimas?
Either one works, but Rimas would probably be more
I've
common.
been mispronouncing your name for our entire friendship. Okay, Rimas. So today, in fact, what we're going to do, what I want to do, the reason I asked you over to my home is because I wanted to help gringx bartenders better understand just how broad the community of agave spirits drinkers is. And, you know, I was recently on a trip with a couple of agave geeks, actually with a bunch of agave geeks, but specifically a couple of them. And they were surprised. They had made the assumption that everybody traveling with us was left-leaning as they are, right? And I'm a bleeding heart liberal. I don't have to tell you that. You know that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of friends who are conservative. And so I don't make that assumption that they did, and they were surprised to find out after saying some things that I think maybe they wouldn't have said in front of conservative-leaning people. They were surprised to find out that not everybody who travels through rural Mexico drinking agave spirits is not left-leaning. They were surprised. So I wanted to talk to you because you are one of my friends. Hey, you're one of my friends.
I am honored.
and I love talking to you.
Thanks.
And I love hanging out with you. But I specifically wanted to talk with you about your proclivities towards politics and your love for agave spirits in rural Mexico. So, Rimas,
Lou.
tell me, what is it that you love about Mexico?
Oh, boy. So there's a lot I love about Mexico. Since you asked it that way, maybe we'll start with the non-agave part of Mexico.
Yeah, sure.
So I grew up in the southwest suburbs, and
Southwest suburbs of
Chicago. Sorry.
look at that.
Can't assume. Can't make any assumptions. People know. And, there were little pockets. It's a pretty for the suburbs, it's pretty diverse area. And I had a good mix of friends in junior high or grade school, junior high, and high school. And I noticed that obviously there's the love of tacos and burritos, but I also really started liking Mexican music. So I would listen to the Mexican radio stations when I'd be driving, cruising through to my friend's house or something like that. And it was like the banda type. Part of that could have been because I really liked punk and ska, and I liked horns. And so anyway, I appreciated that. And I grew up in a Lithuanian household. I'm second generation Lithuanian. And I think my parents, and the way they brought us up, we just had a natural appreciation for like other cultures. So I think that's really where the Mexican thing started. Outside of that, until I got into the agave spirits, there's not much to say.
Okay. So then, so let's get into the politics of it. You are conservative. You are fair to say religious.
Very much.
Okay. So then how do you reconcile that with calls to shut down the border? Yeah, so I think one thing I'd want to clarify is that before I would ever think of myself as a conservative, I would think of myself as a Catholic. Okay.
Right. So
which is very Mexican.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's part of it, I think. I can talk about that later with my travels to Mexico. But I think being Catholic and practicing Catholic in line with church teaching, you naturally, this is not everyone, but I think there's kind of a natural conservatism there. You know, if you think about what the church has been doing for 2,000 years, it has its teachings on truth and morals, and it doesn't change with the whims of the times. So there's a conservative kind of, just something conservative in nature about Catholicism.
Okay.
So as far as politics, you know, I also don't look at politics as the main thing that identifies me is who I am. And I think that partially helps me see past labels and boxes and the tribalism that we've been seeing. I also grew up in a large family with 8 kids. I was the second oldest of 8. And so I got to learn how to get along with different personalities, people with different opinions at an early age. And hope I'm not going on too much of a tangent, but I was also going to say that I grew up with lots of different groups of friends. I didn't really have a clique per se, though I mostly hung out with the skaters. And a lot of them would do things that would, kind of freak my parents out, as far as drugs and alcohol and sex. But I still had that bond with them with the hobbies. And so I continued to hang out with them.
But were you doing the drugs, the alcohol, the sex?
I was not. No, I was not.
And you weren't freaked out by their behavior.
I recognize it may not be the best environment for me to be in, but I saw the goodness in them outside of those things, and I enjoyed their company, right? And we had the hobby in common, which I think will tie to the agave spirits too. But the agave spirits weren't in the picture then. So anyway, I think what happened was I started seeing people and just appreciating them for who they were beyond some of these things that might be separating us. So when it comes to politics, I will say that my personal take on that is that I value relationships over my political views, right? I think it's important to have discussions about politics, but if it's going to jeopardize a relationship, I might actually avoid it. I think some people might say that's not a good thing, or I might approach it very delicately. When it comes to politics, if someone is willing to have an honest discussion where there's genuine curiosity of trying to understand the other person's position, I'm happy to have those discussions. So tying this all back to what you said, you're asking, how do I look at the conservative position specifically on the border wall?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that really applies to Mexico, right?
Yeah.
So this is one area, I hope I'm not disappointing you by kind of taking the middle road, but honestly, and I talked to my wife about this, this is the one thing.
You cleared it with her before you came on, you mean? No?
No, we just have, I love my wife, Sarah. Been married for 15 years now. 5 beautiful children. Got to plug that and say hello. Hey, kids. Hey, Sarah. One thing I've always, we actually don't have like a ton in common as far as like hobbies and activities, at least like I see some people do. But we have like very important things in line with like our faith, family values, worldview, like the big things, right? But it's not like her and I are going mountain biking together, or like she likes mezcal. She appreciates it.
She doesn't necessarily want an introductory box from a game of latte, but she.
Oh, Lou, I can't believe you're bringing that back. That's a whole other story. No, she appreciates it more now than she did at the time, at least. Now that she realizes how amazing mezcal is. But the border wall thing's tough because there's a temptation to kind of get into that tribalism of like, well, of course, as a conservative, I have to like put law and order and, sovereignty of the state above all things. But then like the Catholic part of me is like, what about charity? What about like people who are in need and we have resources, people who are fleeing danger? I also, like one thing that I want to say about, you asked what I like about Mexican culture. Sometimes when I think about the border crisis, I'm like, there could be a lot worse things happening. Because if we're going to have a bunch of people flooding the country, however, legally or illegally, if it's going to be like people from Mexico, I think of them as very hardworking, humble, family-oriented people with like Catholic roots. So I'm like, that's not so bad,
But that's really interesting. So do you ever feel at odds with your fellow conservatives on that issue?
I do. And I'll say that one, while it's a big political issue, it's not a hot button topic for me to where I would start having like debates with them about it. We're probably more concerned about like the culture wars going on in America, which I think has a bigger impact on our children. Though I will say that, thinking about Spanish potentially being like the primary language in America due to all this immigration in like, 2050 or something, that specifically, I think that would affect my children. And as a result, I'm like telling Sarah, I'm like, we got to go live in Oaxaca for a couple of years, They need to become fluent. And you're laughing, but like we've had serious discussions about how can we make this happen.
Well, I'm laughing because it sort of flops the problem on its head.
Right?
Yeah,
now we're running over their border.
Yeah, exactly. Which I kind of love. And I mean, to be clear, like I don't think we should have borders. I'm that unicorn left-leaning liberal who just like if we don't need a border between Indiana and Illinois, and the taxation issues are so significantly different between these two states, and it hasn't caused the collapse of the two states, I don't see why we couldn't just open the border between Mexico and the USA. But
yeah, I mean, so just a question kind of furthering that discussion. So what about the Canada and the USA? Is it just specifically Mexico?
No, I want to keep the Canadians out. I am totally opposed to back bacon. No, I don't like no borders. I'm like, I'm not saying that I'm opposed to a country establishing a border.
Yeah.
Like, okay, if all the citizens want that, cool. What I'm saying is, as a citizen of the USA, I don't want us to have borders. And, I think when I think back to when I look back at what little history I do understand, it looks to me like we really thrived the most when we had immigrants coming relatively freely into the country. And when I think about like post-World War II, what do they call it? The farm exemption, the farm workers exemption, where we allowed people from Mexico to come up. Like that's how so many businesses were built, and so many families thrived, and it built the middle class.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want this to be about politics itself, right? I want our conversation to be about this assumption that I've seen within the mezcal community that everybody must be left-leaning. And I have a number of friends who aren't, who like you are right-leaning. And, so I was in North Carolina this week visiting family, right? My Connie's brother and his wife and two kids, so our niece and nephew. And I love my nephew, and my nephew loves me, and I know this, right? And he knows I'm left-leaning, but he used the word libtard. Ooh. I know, right? And not like, you're a libtard, Unky Lou, but he used it in front of me, and he had to have recognized, in some sense at least, that I'm liberal. Are you calling me a libtard? And I didn't have the explicit conversation with him, and I probably should have, but it was late at night, and I just, by late I mean 8 p.m., so I just wanted to go to bed.
Late.
Yeah, I guess in that way I'm conservative. But when I hate hearing that word because it's demeaning, and it paints everybody with a liberal view as somehow stupid. But when I talk to my liberal friends who also are annoyed by that word, they have no problem throwing out words like fascist in relationship to people who are conservative. And you're not a fascist.
No, definitely not.
And I would imagine, like, if I had to choose between being called a fascist or a libtard, I would take libtard, right? Like, I think the word fascist is such an awful word.
Yeah, there's a lot of like historical implications with that too. Like libtard is a little bit more of, I feel like that's something like maybe kids would call each other in a school
like a
playground, right?
Yeah,
It's like derogatory and definitely unpleasant. I'm sorry you have to hear that
from my nephew. It's okay, I'll deal with him.
Yeah, still. Can I ask how old he is, or is that all right?
Yeah, it's okay. He's 20 now.
Oh, okay. Well, that helps a little bit because all my nieces and nephews are like 5 and 6, and my oldest child is 13, and we have these discussions constantly.
Really?
Yeah, and which is tough because like I want to guide them the right way, but I also I want to be careful to just make sure that I'm not skewing their perspective on reality too much. So I'm very sensitive to this.
Yeah.
But fascists, of course that's rough. Like, me with my Lithuanian background, so talk about immigrants, my grandparents came over to America during World War II. They were fleeing for their lives, and so that's where my Lithuanian heritage comes from. And I was very politically involved as a young kid. We'd be at Daly's Plaza protesting the Soviet Union,
Wow.
and communism. Unfortunately, like some of that too would also just be equivalent to like Russia's evil. Well, I have Russian friends now in Florida, and they're not evil.
Right.
Maybe some of the leaders there are. So, I could see, I can see those experiences and say how there's these extremes that come about. And that is scary. It's tough. I don't know as far as, you bringing this up, like where are you hoping this would go? Like just the fascist part.
Honestly, where I was hoping it would go, the thing that I want to have the conversation about is, I think, look, this is a podcast that's supposed to help gringx bartenders, bitters, and agave spirits in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
This is not Bill Maher, but I think if we want to be a better country, if we want to be a better society, I think we need to be open to not demonizing somebody because they think differently than us or they vote differently than us.
Sure.
I don't think, I'm definitely not voting for Trump, right? But I've got a number of friends who are. I'm assuming you're one.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make you my enemy.
Yeah.
And I think if we can't have reasonable conversations, we're never going to. Let me rephrase. We are only going to get further apart. And you dropped out of social media because, in essence, you were in these forums. And people were posting anti-Trump things in mezcal forums, and it made you. This is my read on it, and please clarify if I'm wrong. But it made you feel incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly unwelcome.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I will also mention. I was like number 80 on smoked agave. I was
number 80. What does that mean? Do we rank people?
Well, when I joined, there were like 80 people in there. So it was like a while ago.
Yeah.
I was in Florida, and Assis Cortez was doing a tasting for the folks at Taco Lu, which actually has a great mezcal selection for Jackson, which is awesome.
Cool.
So, and he invited me to smoke the agave, and there were 80 people in there. And then I saw that grow, and then Mezcal Society eventually came about, and I'm not that involved with that one. But I just, it's nice to be part of that community, because in Jacksonville, there's not a lot of mezcal lovers, right? And the reason I actually left Facebook was with the last election. I was hearing people say that there might be like election rigging with the results. And
not the last election, the previous.
Oh,
one.
well, yeah, sorry, like Trump versus Biden.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
So anyway, like,
so there were people saying that it was rigged. Hang on a second, you're turning this upside down. Are you saying there were people suggesting that it was rigged in favor of Biden?
Yes.
And that bothered you?
Well, what bothered me was that people were saying that it wasn't a fair election. This is like early little whispers of like, I don't know if these results are accurate. And I wanted to get more information about where is this coming from? What's the proof? Why are people saying this? And the only thing I could find was like a Facebook group, because the major media outlets weren't saying this. And so I joined this Facebook group, and then there was a lot of people joining it. I forget what it was called. And then Facebook shut it down. And I got so freaked out, because I was like, I'm just trying to find out. I'm trying to get information to come up with my own conclusion.
Yeah.
So I got really kind of freaked out. I ended up leaving Facebook, but then I will admit that the loss of the mezcal community was just like way worse than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And so I joined back on with the alias Ray Agave, not because I'm trying to hide anything, but I just didn't want to be on Facebook with like friends and family anymore. I just wanted to be able to have access to like basically Smoked Agave Mezcal Society. It's okay that I talk about those specifically on the podcast?
Only Smoked Agave. We don't talk about Mezcal Society
okay,
here.
Yeah. So, but I will say it was very obvious to me, and from the people I met going to Oaxaca and seeing the type of people that were really into the mezcal scene, it was pretty obvious to me that I was an outlier, especially when it came to politics. And, it's that kind of debate in my head of, is that the place to be discussing politics? I would like to say maybe that should be a place where we don't have to, but then if it's important to people and that's like how they identify, like, I don't want to say you can't do that, right?
God, I would actually say, I think it's important that everywhere we talk about politics. Yeah. And I mean literally everywhere. I really think, I can remember in the 90s, I started reading these articles in newspapers that were the advice columns, where they were talking about how to deal with your family when you go home for Thanksgiving. And the suggestion was to avoid politics. And I think it's in that avoidance, it's in it's easier to not talk about politics without question.
Right.
But by not talking about it for years and years and years, you start putting yourselves into silos, I think, in a way that distance you from the same people that you really love and make you other them by distancing them. I don't know if you know this about the work that I've done, but I worked for the National Association to Protect Children years ago. You didn't know that. Okay.
Yes.
And, I was in the fundraising side, and the vast majority of funding that we received came from people who were far more aligned with you politically than with me. And inevitably, because we were talking about child protection, and protecting children from physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, right? This is a nonprofit that started as a lobbying group to pass laws to protect kids from physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Inevitably, our conversations would turn to abortion. And, and I am very pro-choice, and almost to a one, our biggest donors were always pro-life and anti-abortion. And, it took me a while to wrap my head around it, because these were people I liked them, and I felt like I had my tribe, and this wasn't my tribe, as you say. And it took me a while to come to this conclusion, but the piece of it that helped me have the conversations with them was walking away from our specific strategies and instead focusing on objectives. right? And if you think about abortion specifically, and this is a podcast about abortion, this is a podcast not about abortion, but if you, sorry, this is a weird tangent.
You're going heavy here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but but again, I think that the heavy conversations are the important conversations.
Sure.
But if you think about if I think about why you are opposed to abortion and why I am pro-life, I think it comes down to the same thing, which is neither of us wants to see a child harmed. We might disagree over the definition of a child, but neither of us wants to see a child harmed. Now, do we want to focus on the disagreement or do we want to focus on the agreement? And I think that there's a lot more strength in two people coming together on what they can agree about than disagree about. Let's deal with the disagreement down the road. There are an awful lot of children where we can agree that they're children. And this is what I would say to the donors. And this is how we raise so much money to pass laws that protected kids from physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, was by having the conversations about what we agreed about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 8-year-old. Neither of us wants to see that child harmed. Neither of us wants to see that child killed. So do we want to focus on the disagreements or the agreements? Do we want to have a society that comes together and eventually, we have some successes and then we can talk about the things that we disagree with? Because once you have those successes, then you can have real, honest conversations with people that you do respect and you love, instead of just writing somebody off as a fascist or a libtard.
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking wisdom right there. And, that whole idea of focusing on what brings us together definitely was in the back of my mind as we started this discussion, because I mentioned how we had these common hobbies with my skateboarder friends or my snowboarder friends. And like you and I, like one of my parents are like, "Where are you going?" Or my people are wondering where I'm leaving. I'm like, I'm going to go hang out with my Agave brother, Yeah. And it's so like, it's finding those. Now that's more of like a common interest. Like some of the things that you're talking about go even deeper.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're saying a common interest, but the thing that we haven't said yet, and I think that really is relevant, and I hope you're okay with me saying this, is, we've got a lot of donors at Sacred, the nonprofit that I started and I continue to run, that helps improve quality of life in the rural Mexican communities where heritage agave spirits are made. And, and I love agave spirits, but if I found out I was allergic to agave tomorrow and I couldn't drink them, I wouldn't stop doing what I'm doing. Because what I really love is this multi-generational wisdom that probably more reflects your conservative views than my liberal views, right? But I see so much in this multi-generational wisdom that we cannot afford to have it disappear. And as we drink more and more mezcal and more tequila, we're putting so much pressure on these communities that puts their resources at risk, that I think endangers that multi-generational wisdom. So, we look to donors. We go to these communities. We speak to the mezcalerxs about what problems they have. We ask them what solutions they imagine to those problems, and then we try to find the resources to implement their theoretical solutions. And we right before the pandemic got a request from Santa Maria Ixcatlan to create. They were having droughts in this community of 485 people up in the mountains of Oaxaca, and so they asked if we could help them to build a rain harvest system to create some water security. And before that happened, we were $35,000-$40,000 a year, sometimes $50,000, right? And they were asking us for, I want to say it was, it's on the website, so I'm pulling the numbers out of my butt now, but I want to say it was about a $12,000 or $15,000 budget. And you were the majority of that budget. You are I've got a lot of corporate donors who give more money than you. I don't have a single individual who does. And the idea that somehow my fellow liberals suggest that conservatives are without compassion when I don't have anybody stepping up like you. And, you know, I'm not, this is not to say that if you're not giving as much money as Rimas that you don't, but it's to say, like, you stepped up in a really big way, and it's not like you're a rich dude.
No, definitely not. Definitely not rich. So
you've got 5 kids. You're never going to be rich.
Definitely not. So thank you. First of all, thank you for doing what you do is sacred. I am honored to not only be on this podcast, but I'm honored that I could be part of that project. And for me, kind of going back, it's less conservatism and more my Catholic faith. You know, I believe that God blesses us with various gifts, and I need to share those gifts, right? And there's a concept of tithing. Are you familiar with that, right?
Sure, yeah.
Biblical
10%.
concept.
Is it 10%?
It's 10%, yeah. Like by definition, it's 10%. I have friends who do like 10% of gross without even batting an eye.
It's gross
income.
Wow.
Like, not that it's not meant to be something that you like sit there and hyperanalyze, but you're supposed to discern. Like, you know, it's not always realistic to necessarily give an actual 10%. So then,
particularly when you've got 5 kids.
Yeah. So there's there could be a little bit of a debate on that, but some people do 10% off of their net income or salary, maybe not. So anyway, what happened was I tried to tithe or give money as much as I can to various causes and nonprofits. First, we'll go to like our parish, the Catholic Church we belong to. There's an organization that I worked with for 2 years as a Catholic missionary on college campuses. So I support some missionaries. And I was saving some money because I thought it'd be cool to give like a bigger chunk to like my old high school, like an old Catholic high school, or like a Catholic university that was being built up in Denver. And, you know, in the midst of saving up for this money, I got introduced to Sacred. I had made some trips to Mexico, and I completely just fell in love with everything about it, especially the people there and just the stories of the people. And, you know, I was thinking how cool it would be to take that money that might go some way in like a high school in America, but how much more amazing would it be to like make a deep impact on a small community somewhere that like really needs it. So I feel like in a way that any kind of donation I can give, it almost like it gets like exponentially, it grows exponentially if you're sending it to Mexico to some extent. Right?
Yeah, a dollar goes a lot farther in Mexico than it goes here.
Yeah, and there's just I think the way the mezcal world is, if you're really into it, we really dive into the stories of the producers, right? We dive into the story of the towns and the history. So you feel a connection. But this water project that you had, I'd never been to Ixcatlan. I've been there since with Chava, which was awesome to meet the people there and Armando, right?
Yeah, Armando.
I want them to say Armando, but and just kind of hang out with them. I don't speak Spanish, but just watching him converse with Chava and just seeing them do their thing, it was just paradise, you know. So what I'll just say is I was already in a giving mindset, and then seeing what you did and being able to combine my giving to this area that is really close to my heart is just amazing. I'm so glad I could do that. And it's not just sending money to Mexico. It's like sending money to a small town that I could go visit and I could go see and touch the water reservoir.
Yeah.
So, and I know not everyone might have a larger chunk of change to donate, but like you said, even small amounts go a long way there.
Yeah. But to me, the vital point to that, and it's not the last time that you've contributed, and literally, I mean, you paid for a whole greenhouse in a town. It's funny. I had this whole fundraising plan ready for funding a greenhouse in this community in Puebla, and you upended it and just paid for it all. And and that's, I mean, it was annoying that I had to figure out a new plan, but for the money we were raising. But what a great problem to have. But to circle back to the reason to have this conversation, you get chased away from the mezcal community because it's not welcoming to somebody who's ironically Catholic, right? When the vast majority of Mexico is. And it doesn't make us better. It doesn't make us better as a people. It means we don't have water security in that town. And so, for me, I wanted to have this conversation with you on this podcast specifically so that gringx bartenders and just generally the people in the agave spirits world who tend to lean liberal think about not only the fact that the communities that you love so much in Mexico are probably far more aligned with your positions on matters than on their own positions, but also that if we can't be open, if we can't have loving conversations and loving disagreements with people, we're going to cause damage.
Yeah, and it'll just perpetuate the cycle that we're in.
Yeah.
And you did mention, I know you were kind of thinking that I left Facebook more because I felt unwelcome in some of those groups. But I will say it can be hard for people that see things differently than myself and my, I guess, right-leaning, partners, cohorts, whatever you want to call them, mezcal nerds. They might not feel like we're out there because we, at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, but I would imagine others don't feel like they could be open about their views, right?
Yeah.
They'd be, you can go in there and if you want to, you could stir the pot and speak openly about your views, but it's not going to end well, most likely. So, I would at least personally avoid speaking out vocally. And so it could make it seem like it's very lopsided. So I think it's a good point that you're making that, be aware that there are people that have this common interest, that have this love for agave spirits, love for Mexico and Oaxaca, and that you do have very important things in common, but maybe you're not on the same page with the political stuff.
Yeah, and let's not chase them away because we are much better together than we are apart.
And it sounds cheesy, but it's 100% true. It's 100% true. It's the division in the country, division in family, whatever it is, it's always painful, to see happening. And until we start having more conversations like this, where there's some genuine curiosity, maybe some desire to understand someone else's perspective, and also just maybe thinking twice before you throw out a certain slur or something like that.
Yeah.
I think we'll be better off for sure.
Sweet. Okay. And unless you got something else to add, I think that's a beautiful point to wrap on.
Yeah, I can end on that one. I'll save the rest for part 2.
Okay.
This is Future Rimas. So, as we're talking about this unity and just how, divided our country is and what the potential antidote to that would be, something struck me the other week. I was exercising on the stairs of an old toboggan hill called Swallow Cliff. If you're ever looking for some exercise, it's a great place to do that outside. I was struck by how many people there are there in general and how there's so many different shapes and sizes and ages of people that are coming together and working up a sweat. But anyway, when I was there, I saw a young girl, probably 11 or 12 years old of age. She had a T-shirt that I think really captured the wrong mindset that's got us in this predicament that we are as a society, which is her T-shirt said, "I don't listen to anyone else's opinions. I only listen to myself." And to me, I think that struck home because I'm teaching my kids to not necessarily be open-minded necessarily. I feel like that could be a little like too cliche or new agey of a term, but to be humble enough to realize that you're not always going to be right. And I think with that mindset, you can approach life and approach people with opposing views or different views with an open mind and with the goal of trying to understand really where they're coming from. So I think the more we can embrace that honest and genuine curiosity and sincerity, I think the better off we'll be, and we can slowly try to patch things together again.
Okay, Rimas, I will catch you next episode. Thanks for joining me on this road trip.
Thanks for having me, Lou.
You've been listening to Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps gringx bartenders better understand agave spirits, and rural Mexico. We're blessed with sound engineering by Roy Sierra and a theme song performed by Gabriel Oliveira and Marco Ricos. Sign up to become a road tripper and listen to more episodes at agaveroadtrip.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know. And if you hated it, well, I'm sure you'll let us know that too. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Agave Road Trip. Agave Road Trip is a production of 10 Angry Pit Bulls, Inc. Agave Road Trip is powered by Simplecast. Thank you for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. To subscribe to the Heritage Radio newsletter, enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with Heritage Radio Network on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find Heritage Radio Network at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization using the power of educational storytelling about food to build a more equitable, resilient food system. Heritage Radio Network couldn't do that without support from listeners like you. Become a part of the world's most innovative community today. Subscribe to the shows you like. Tell your friends. And please join the Heritage Radio Network family by becoming a member. To become a member of the Heritage Radio Network, click on the beating heart of our homepage. Heritage Radio Network can become addictive. Programming you hear on Heritage Radio Network might lead you to eat, drink, and listen to more programming on Heritage Radio Network. If you drink, please do not drink and drive. Drink responsibly. Drive responsibly. Eat responsibly too. And listen to Heritage Radio Network responsibly. To listen to Heritage Radio Network responsibly, wear protective earbuds. While wearing protective earbuds, do not drive. Do not walk either. Sit in a comfortable chair. If that comfortable chair has a hard seat, please remember to stretch every 30 minutes. If you stretch every 30 minutes, please stay within your defined stretching capacity. And consult a doctor who specializes in stretching. If you don't have a doctor, maybe Dr. Ryan Acock, the Cocktail MD, can help you out. Thanks for listening. Agave Road Trip out.